Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. The United States is warning it will not cut steel tariffs unless the EU adopts what they called balanced digital market rules. A dispute unfolding just as Washington and Europe confront a deeper question raised by emerging Russia-Ukraine peace talks. How far should economic reintegration with Moscow go if a deal is reached? From possible sanctions relief to the contentious idea of reviving Nord Stream, transatlantic positions remain sharply split. We'll understand and analyze those stakes and implications now with Tomasz Kasprowicz, editor-in-chief of Res Publica Nowa. Hi, welcome back to TVP World. Good to have you.
Hello, thank you.
Tomasz, let's start with this meeting between U.S. and EU trade ministers yesterday in Brussels. Now, in terms of this statement, essentially, Lutnick saying very much that there won't be any lowering of steel and aluminum tariffs unless the EU adjusts its digital policy. So, effectively, we're linking concessions here. What do you make of this? How significant is this? Does this derail that agreement been made earlier?
Well, first of all, let's look at the broader picture. So there are big shots fired in the spring, and basically a freeze on international trade happened. Now everybody is backing down a little bit. Trump is decreasing certain tariffs on his own. So it seems that the tariff war went from very hot stage to a slightly lower temperature. The same is true with China, that was imposing restrictions on rare earth metals that were suspended for 1 year. So we have a breather point for possibly finding some kind of the solutions. Of course, what we have now is not really very I would say satisfactory to Europe, and those tariffs that US is actually including is still painful, and US knows that, and of course doesn't want those tariffs, especially for aluminum and steel, to be this high, but wants something in exchange. And of course what Europe has is ample services market. And the talks about digital tax are ongoing, and this is something US doesn't want very much because, of course, Trump is talking all the time about the trade imbalances when we are talking about goods, but is kind of forgetting about the trade imbalances in services, where actually the United States are quite a lot ahead.
Okay. So I want to jump in on that, Tomasz, because on the trade imbalance, I mean, this is the one thing that the Americans have argued, is that these regulations potentially from the European Union disproportionately would affect and impact American tech companies. But how realistic do you think is it? I mean, that the EU would scale back, would modify the Digital Services Act, the Digital Services Market Act? How realistic is that they would actually do that by the pressure of the Americans?
Well, that all depends on the size of the pressure, of course, because US still has quite a few choke points on the Europe. Those are diminishing to a degree by the policy of Trump. So for example, gradual withdrawal of US from European security is one of those. So that gives Europe slightly more leverage. But until the war in Ukraine is resolved, the importance of United States is paramount, and the pressure can be significant. So when push comes to shove, the Americans can give an ultimatum that will actually force Europe to make some amends, or what is very popular right now, freeze some of the regulation for some time in the future, which is basically giving the other side what they want, at least for a time, without losing face. So this is basically the stage we are right now in.
Tomasz, also you mentioned Ukraine. I want to ask you about this as well, because this is also something that's come up the last few days in some of these peace point proposal plans, is that the Americans very much are pushing very hard, very fast for potential reintegration, economic reintegration of Russia into global markets. Sanctions relief. The Europeans, on the other hand, are saying, well, not so fast. Now, they haven't disregarded it in principle, but they're saying we have to compensate Ukraine first. So what's your first reaction to this? I mean, we've got, especially Europe has had several sanctions packages. How realistic is that they would now unroll that?
Not in the near term, I believe, despite, of course, there being certain groups, especially when we talk about the German industry, that would really like the business as usual to come back as soon as possible. But this is not politically feasible in Europe right now. And if there is a relief, it will be a gradual relief over time, especially that Russia doesn't have that strong of cards to demand this relief. If anything, it could be a pressure of United States. This sort of pressure would be, on the other hand, be quite strange, because this is not necessarily in the best interest of United States. But President Trump in recent times behaved in a very strange ways when it comes to Russia, so we cannot rule out anything, at least as long as we don't know what kind of pressure points Russia has on Trump and what can be done about it. Let's not forget Trump is facing multiple problems internally. The inflation, especially food inflation, due to the tariffs, finally kicked in. He has a problem with Epstein files and some sort of dissent in MAGA community. He is very unpopular right now, so he needs a win, and pushing for a quick resolution to a Russo-Ukrainian war is probably a part of the push to cover this troubling situation, as well as the situation in Venezuela, which is very troubling. We don't know what's going on there and what will happen. But if Trump is put into a corner, he might do something quite disturbing.
All right, but also speaking, you mentioned in your answer there Germany. I mean, one of the things we're also hearing about, it's not the first time, that Nord Stream, both 1 and 2, may well be restarted. I mean, they were damaged. I mean, Nord Stream was damaged, but it was never dismantled. It's still there. There are certain people in Germany, an industry, public and private, who certainly would like that kind of gas link to continue once again. I mean, with all the efforts that have been made, now talking about having these 2 pipelines being reactivated, A, first of all, is it realistic? 2, I mean, all the efforts that have been done now to try and look for energy independence from Russia, I mean, that would basically set us back, or do you see this as going forward? Is this just now a political talking point? What's your view there?
Well, we moved out from the Russian influence when it comes to energy, and this happened, period. Of course, having cheaper energy is nice, but a view of some German industry that resuming business with Russia will bring back the German prosperity is basically not realistic from the point of view that it won't help. The problems of German economy are much deeper than just cheap gas right now. So they may fool themselves that will help to solve their problems. No, it won't. Now, will those pipelines be resumed? Well, of course, this is a political decision on one hand, and we cannot rule out anything. But I don't believe this would happen very soon. Of course, the events of the beginning of the war show that this kind of infrastructure is pretty vulnerable to attack. We have one line basically out of commission, and bringing it back to work would be troublesome. Making similar type of damage to the second line is no doubt of the question. And then, of course, this could not restart feasibly. Will this pipeline be ever used again in the future? Possibly, but I don't see it happening very soon.
But on that note, I mean, as I mentioned, this may well, as you said, you may have an argument that it will not fix Germany's economy, and definitely there is now political change that most Germans rejected. But how realistic? There are rumors about this, that the Americans may step in with the Russians to, let's say, buy up or control Nord Stream to then also control gas flows. Do you think that's a realistic possibility potentially?
Well, it seems that Putin is enticing Trump with a lot of things to be on his side. This is, of course, access to Russian raw materials. And this is important from the point of view of, for example, Chinese chokehold on those raw materials. Of course, if Trump believes that Russia will do anything against China, then he's mistaken. And of course, whatever Russia will offer eventually will be sanctioned by China, because Russia is so dependent on China right now and in the future that we cannot expect anything else. So this is a bit naive.
Tomasz, I want to jump in on another important point as well. I mean, let's just say, even in these proposals, these different points we're seeing, I think on the European counter-proposal, it said that this would be a case-by-case basis, that it would be a gradual process. So my first question then, how long would that be? I mean, this is theoretical at this point, but at the same time, I'm wondering, so much has been done to have Western companies remove their entities from Russia. Are they even willing at this point? I mean, there's reputational risk, there's legal hurdles. Would companies want to take that risk again?
Well, first of all, the damage to the Russian economy is done. And this is something that we can say pretty seriously. Yes, of course, many of the companies will not return to this market. Some will, especially the ones that don't require too much of the fixed investment, especially the companies that were the last to move out of Russia. We can expect Russia offering the assets back to those companies, the assets that were seized when they were exiting the Russia, to entice them to return. But this will not fix the problems of Russian economy, which are even deeper than the problems of German economy by any stretch. So this damage is already done, and if there is going to be a return to Russia, it's going to be very gradual and really careful, at least when it comes to European companies. And let's not forget another thing, that it will depend on the stance of Russia after the peace is reached. So I believe that Russia will be really closely monitored, whether it's actually following all of the points that will be agreed, if there will be points agreed, and only then certain sanctions will be removed, unless the US, for unknown reasons, will try to pressure Europe to drop the sanction out of the sudden. But that sounds pretty outrageous.
Right, okay, so as we just could tell from that conversation, there's going to be many variables, if at all this does happen, and it would be many, many more questions to analyze on the way. Look, we'll close it there. Thank you so much. That was Tomasz Kasprowicz, Editor-in-Chief there of Res Publica Nowa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay tuned right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.